Hi everyone, and welcome to Horror Spectator. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We dive deep into the darkest, most chilling real-life horror stories out there. And if you're a returning viewer, I'm so glad to have you back, friend. In this video, we're diving into 7 stories from people who lived through truly terrifying moments in the Appalachian Mountains. From those who lived deep in the forest and came across things they still can't explain, to others who had their homes completely broken into. These mountains are full of mystery, tension, and in some cases, cold-blooded killers. These are stories that have never been featured on this channel. So if you've been waiting for this video, thanks for sticking around. I'm glad you're here. Your support means everything. Every comment, every like, every time you just sit back and listen. It's what keeps this channel alive. So thank you for being here. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's head back into the mountains. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. What I'm about to tell you happened about 2 weeks ago, and honestly, I still don't really know what happened, or how, and definitely not why. I live in West Virginia, in one of the most remote parts of the state. Houses are pretty spread out, tons of woods all around, quiet and peaceful. I love living here. I love nature and my routines. I've got a regular job, a regular house, and that's more than enough for me. I live a quiet life, and I'm happy that way. Since we're a small community, in a part of the country full of old stories, myths, and folklore, crime's not really a thing around here. It's not uncommon for people to go missing in the woods, and weird stuff happens sometimes, but I don't think I've ever heard of an actual house being broken into. Sometimes strange stuff goes on, but it's forest stuff. Noises, movement, animals, nothing to do with real people, nothing dangerous. And when it comes to what comes out of the woods, folks around here grow up knowing how to deal with it. We learn from a young age that the forest plays by its own rules. What I'm gonna tell you happened 2 nights ago. The night I went to a party at one of my best friend's place. He and his sister share a birthday. They're not twins, they're a year apart. But they were both born on May 15th, so every year they throw a big party together. The party was the usual. Fun, full of people we've known forever and lots of drinking. But just so we're clear, I didn't have a drop. I'm known for being the responsible one in the group. I live in an area with dangerous roads, dark, winding, through the woods. I didn't touch any alcohol. The last thing I wanted was to end up in a ditch somewhere because I was being stupid. I was driving home that night, and I wanted to get there safe. I ended up leaving the party later than I planned. The drive home takes a solid 38 minutes, all through the mountains. There are stretches where you can't see anything but your headlights. And at that hour, you don't pass a single soul. Since I was one of the only sober ones, I even took a detour to drop off 2 friends. That added another 15 minutes to the drive. No big deal. I know those roads well, and I actually like driving there at night. There's something relaxing about the total silence and complete darkness. The drive was smooth, like always, until about halfway through, when I suddenly had to pee. If it had been daytime, I'd have pulled over on the side of the road and taken care of it. But at night, in the middle of the forest, no way. I'd only stop if it was absolutely necessary. Luckily, about 5 minutes down the road, there's a gas station where I could use the bathroom. It's not a place I like stopping at. First off, I can't stand the guy who works there. Rude, rough, always giving off this sketchy vibe. And I'm not the kind of person who lets people walk all over me, so I'd snapped at him before. Second, the station itself is creepy. It's in the middle of nowhere, barely lit, super old, and it just feels like the kind of place weirdos like to hang out. But I really had to go. And honestly, between that and the woods, the gas station was the lesser evil. As soon as I parked, I headed straight toward the bathroom. On the way, I looked inside and saw the guy nodding at someone, subtly motioning in the direction of my car. That made me uneasy. First, because I didn't see anyone else in the store. Just him. Second, I remembered I hadn't locked the car. I thought about going back to lock it, but I figured, I'm just peeing. I won't lose sight of the car for more than a minute. So I let it go. Right before stepping into the bathroom, I glanced back at the store. The guy was staring right at me. Still no sign of anyone else inside. I even thought, half joking, maybe the isolation's getting to me. Maybe I've started imagining people. While I was washing my hands, I clearly heard a car door slam shut. It made my blood run cold. I rushed outside, thinking maybe another car had pulled in, but the lot was empty. My car was exactly how I'd left it. I sped up toward it, and the moment I got there, I looked inside. Front seats, back seats, nothing. I looked back at the store, and the guy was still staring at me. I felt a shiver run through my whole body. I'm not usually the type to get spooked. Living around here, you get tough to that stuff. I rarely feel threatened or scared, but something about that whole situation had me on edge. I got in the car and drove off. Next time, I'd just piss in the woods. The rest of the drive was uneventful, but I couldn't stop thinking about that weird interaction. His look, the nod, the car door sound. It was all a bit too weird, but maybe I was just on edge and overthinking things. When I got home, I pulled into the garage, locked everything up, and went straight to bed. I woke up around 3:40 a.m. to a noise. I stayed in bed listening, but didn't hear anything else. I tried to fall back asleep, but I've got insomnia. I got up to use the bathroom, maybe grab something to eat. As I left my room, I noticed the door was slightly open. That threw me off. Had I forgotten to close it? Maybe, but it was unlikely. I've had this weird thing since I was a kid. I can't sleep with the door open. I always close it, almost automatically. Still, I figured I was just tired and brushed it off. After the bathroom, I started heading downstairs to the kitchen. To give you a better idea of the house, it's 2 stories. Upstairs are the bedrooms, a bathroom, and the office. Downstairs, you walk into a small hallway that leads to the stairs. Kitchen and garage are to the right, living and dining rooms to the left. There's also a small bathroom next to the stairs. So I head straight to the kitchen. At first, nothing seemed off. But then when I touched the fridge handle, it felt sticky. That was weird. I looked around. There were things on the counter I hadn't taken out. Crumbs all over the floor. A chair out of place. That sinking feeling in your gut, the kind that feels like it's pulling you inside out, started growing. Someone had been there. Someone had been walking around my house while I was asleep. The memory of the bedroom door came rushing back. But how? How had someone gotten in? I had locked everything. I'd checked the doors. The house was secure. I went straight to the bedroom and grabbed my gun. Then, as calmly as I could, I started checking the house, room by room. The feeling that I wasn't alone was unbearable. Every shadow looked suspicious. It wasn't even fear, really. More like this overwhelming sense of having my space violated. and the more I walked around, the more little things I noticed. Stuff just slightly out of place. Barely noticeable, but real. Someone had been moving around the house, touching my stuff. The obvious thought hit me. The alarm had been on, so either the person was already inside when I got home, or they came in with me. Then I walked into the living room, and there he was. Lying on the couch, some guy in his 40s, completely relaxed, sleeping like it was his damn house. I didn't say a word, didn't shout or ask anything. I pointed the gun straight at him and tapped the barrel on his head. He opened his eyes slowly and looked right at me. No fear, no urgency, just locked his eyes on mine. I told him as calmly as I could that the cops were already on their way, and if he didn't get out right now, I'd shoot. What freaked me out the most wasn't that he didn't get aggressive. I was ready for that. I thought he might flip out or get violent. But no. What made me feel sick was how disconnected from reality he seemed. Like none of it was real to him. He got up slowly, didn't say a word. Walked to the front door, opened it, and walked out. I shut the door the second he crossed the threshold, locked everything again, and just stood there, trying to process what the hell had just happened. Obviously, I didn't go back to sleep. The next day, still in shock, I called Ethan, one of my closest friends. I told him what happened, but only the part after I got home. I hadn't even thought about the stuff earlier until he asked me to go over everything from the moment I left the party, and that's when it all clicked. I remembered the gas station, the guy and the nod toward someone, the car door noise I heard while I was in the bathroom. That's when I realized I never checked the trunk. How could I have missed that? How could I have been that stupid? I went to the garage and opened it up. Nothing was out of place. But I knew for sure. The guy had come home with me, hiding in the trunk. Why? That's what's been haunting me for the past days. The weird part is that nothing was stolen. He didn't look homeless. The only thing that makes sense is that he was high, and that explains why he seemed so out of it. What pisses me off the most is thinking about the gas station guy. I know he knows something. He's in on this somehow, I'm sure of it. And I know one of these days I'm gonna lose my patience and confront him. What I'm about to tell you is, hands down, the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. And the craziest part is, it happened just a week ago, up in the Appalachian Mountains. It all went down with me, Kevin, and Lillian. We've been tight since forever. I've known them both for as long as I can remember. They're pretty much like siblings to me. About 5 years ago, the three of us started hiking together, and ever since then, it kind of became our thing. We go explore different trails in these mountains every year. This time around, we were doing a stretch up in Maine. We'd never been to that area before, so we were super pumped. Or at least Lillian and I were. Kevin had just gone through a breakup, like literally 3 weeks before the trip. And from what he told us, it had ended in a total mess. He wanted to do the hike to clear his head a bit, but even so, you could tell his mood was all over the place. Lillian and I did our best to keep things light, to lift him up, and sometimes we actually managed to get him laughing and talking. But by the end of each day, he'd always slide back into that same gloomy state. For 3 nights we did everything we could. We told dumb jokes, tried to scare each other with creepy forest stories just to keep things light. But on the 4th night, man, Kevin was in a really dark place. That's when I decided it was time to pull out the bottle of whiskey I'd brought. I hadn't mentioned it before, partly because I knew Lillian wouldn't approve, and also because drinking in the middle of the woods is well, not the smartest move. Your senses get all fogged up, and out here, that can be the difference between life and death. But I know Kevin. This wasn't his first breakup. Actually, it was his third. And every time, he'd fall into this same deep, miserable funk. So I figured, worst case, I'd let him drink just a little. That night, we were sitting around the fire, talking about some YouTube video we'd watched, about a camper who went missing near Black Mountain in Pennsylvania. Kevin's always been into that kind of spooky stuff, but even that didn't get a rise out of him. That's when I gave Lillian a little look, like stay cool, and went to grab the bottle. To my surprise, she didn't give me the look. You know the one. I think she realized what I was trying to do. Kevin's eyes lit up as soon as he saw the whiskey. Neither Lillian nor I had a drop. We wanted to stay sharp. But Kevin drank. And drank. At one point, I had to actually take the bottle away from him. But honestly, mission accomplished. It was like flipping a switch. He came back to life. He started laughing, talking, joking around again, and suddenly the three of us were just having fun. It felt like the old days. It was one of those easy, goofy nights, and I was genuinely glad I'd packed that bottle last minute before leaving the house. We ended up heading to our tents a little later than usual. I already knew the next day was gonna suck. Kevin would be hungover and we'd be wiped. But it was totally worth it for that one good night. Our tents were a bit spaced out. The spot we'd picked wasn't ideal, and that setup was just the most comfortable layout we could find. It took me a while to fall asleep, but I eventually drifted off. And then around 4 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a man laughing. I was so out of it at first that I didn't even register that it wasn't Kevin. I just laid there, half asleep, listening to this laugh echoing through the woods. Then, suddenly Lillian burst into my tent, whisper shouting that it wasn't Kevin, that there was someone in the forest, just a few steps away, laughing like a complete maniac. The adrenaline hit me hard. I snapped out of my fog, grabbed my gun, and just from the look in Lillian's eyes, I knew she was freaking out. Which, honestly, who wouldn't be? We were in the middle of nowhere, high up in the mountains, in a place known for weird stories. And now, there was some lunatic out there, laughing his ass off in the dark. I told Lillian to go check on Kevin. Then I stepped out of the tent with my gun raised toward the sound. But I couldn't see anything. Just pitch-black trees and that damn laughter. Sometimes it sounded super close, like the guy was right there between the trees. And then other times it felt further away, like he was running in circles around us. I yelled out that we were armed. The only response, louder, more high-pitched laughter. I yelled again, told him I wasn't messing around. But he just kept going, laughing and laughing. Sometimes it'd stop, and we'd get this dead silence. Like the forest itself was holding its breath. Then, out of nowhere, it'd start again. We stayed up all night, just sitting there, totally freaked out, waiting for daylight. And as soon as the sun came up, we didn't waste a second. We packed our stuff and got the hell out. We knew we were just a few hours away from a small town, and that's exactly where we headed. After that night, none of us wanted to spend one more minute in those woods. My name is Noah, and I've been house sitting for about 6 years. Sometimes I also take on pet sitting jobs, but most of the time, it's just house sitting. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I usually only take gigs around here, unless the pay is really good, and they cover all travel expenses. In this particular case, the situation was different. One of my best friends, James, lives in West Virginia and asked me to look after his house. We've known each other since we were kids. We're alike. We used to spend hours playing games together, and even though these days we only see each other maybe once a year, I know his house pretty well. The story I'm about to tell you happened about a year ago when I agreed to house sit for him. He was going to be gone for a week and didn't want to leave the house empty. He warned me a few times about what I needed to do to stay in that area. Which, to be fair, I already knew from previous visits. Another important thing is that about 3 years ago, he was sharing the house with a friend named Nick. I'd never met him, but from what James told me, he seemed like a cool guy. He worked in deliveries and was often gone for weeks at a time doing those long-haul trips. The week I was staying there, he wasn't supposed to be home either. The thing about Nick was that his schedule was unpredictable. Sometimes he'd be gone longer. Sometimes he'd come back early. So before leaving, James gave me his contact info just in case. Meaning, I'd never met him, but he knew I was going to be there, and I had his number. I was planning for a peaceful week. They lived in a quiet area, surrounded by trees and with only a few neighbors. For me, it felt like a mini vacation, and I was honestly happy to have it. On top of that, I was trying to build my own website and launch a business, so I figured I'd use the time to focus on that. The first day went exactly like that. I stayed out on the patio, soaking up the sun and working on the site. Everything went smoothly. I even ended up going to bed earlier than usual, and the night was quiet. The next day, I was genuinely excited to get back to work. I'd slept well and felt full of energy. I went back to the same spot on the patio. But around 4 p.m., I thought I saw someone in the trees. Like they were watching me. I immediately stood up and walked a little closer, calling out and trying to see if anyone was there. Maybe it was a neighbor who didn't know me and thought it was weird I was there. I wasn't thinking anything bad, but when I called a few times and no one answered or came out from behind the trees, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Still, I went back to where I was and stayed alert for a while. But I didn't see anyone else until 6 p.m., when I closed my laptop and went back inside. I made myself a light dinner and once again went to bed early. The house has 3 bedrooms, so I stayed in the guest room. I put on Netflix and started a movie. I think I fell asleep halfway through because I don't even remember how it ended. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of the front door opening and closing. I nearly had a heart attack. I was supposed to be alone, and Nick wasn't supposed to come back that week. But whoever it was had used a key to come in through the front door. So it didn't even cross my mind that it wasn't him. James had already told me Nick's schedule was weird. I stayed in the room, listening to the sounds downstairs. I thought about going out to introduce myself, but it was 3 a.m., and that felt off, so I figured I'd do it in the morning. The only thing I did was quietly get up and lock the bedroom door. I heard the person come upstairs and go into the bathroom. The upstairs layout is like this. Right at the top of the stairs to the right is the bathroom. Then comes James's room, the biggest one. Then Nick's, the second biggest. And at the end of the hallway is the room I was in, which also serves as storage. The only reason the room was set up at all was because James's sister used to stay there a lot. Then I heard the person leave the bathroom and walk down the hall. There was a loud, sharp noise, followed by a door opening. It freaked me out. The sound had been loud, but I couldn't tell what it was. I heard footsteps in the room. First slow, then faster, almost frantic. It made me feel uneasy. I seriously considered texting Nick, but again, it was his house, and I was the guest. I figured I'd just introduce myself in the morning and ask what that noise had been. I tried to go back to sleep, convincing myself everything was fine. But then, I heard the door open again. Footsteps in the hall, and someone trying to open my bedroom door. I jumped up right away, sat on the bed, and said it was me, that James had asked me to stay there. I waited for a response, but nothing. I could tell someone was on the other side of the door. Besides, I hadn't heard them walk away. I said again, "Nick?" Nothing. Dead silence. Then I heard the person walk off and go back downstairs. That whole interaction was one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. James had assured me he knew I was coming and that he was a chill guy. That was anything but chill. I tried to sleep again, but I couldn't. I turned the TV back on and just let it play whatever was on, not really paying attention. I got up early and went out to the porch to keep working on the site. But this time I couldn't focus. I couldn't shake what had happened the night before, and I was starting to worry Nick might actually be weird. I wasn't scared he'd hurt me or anything. I just didn't want things to get awkward between us. Around noon, I went back inside to make lunch. Nick still hadn't come out of his room, but I didn't think much of it. He'd gotten in late and had probably stayed up unpacking or something. I ate, then went back to my usual spot on the porch. But by 5 p.m., he still hadn't shown up. I started feeling uncomfortable, like maybe he was avoiding me. So I decided to text him, saying I was there and that there was leftover lunch. The reply came almost immediately. He said he wasn't home and wouldn't be back for at least 2 more weeks. I felt a cold chill run through my body. Whoever had come in the night before had used the front door, with a key. Could it have been James's sister? Some other relative? I rushed back inside, shut the door behind me, and went upstairs. Whoever it was had gone through the bedrooms. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen that morning. Both James's and Nick's bedroom doors had signs of forced entry. My pulse kicked up. I went to try James's door. It wasn't locked, and the room was a mess. Clothes everywhere, stuff all over the floor. Someone had been rummaging through it. Then I went to Nick's room. Same thing. Signs of forced entry. Same chaos. I called James right away, desperate to find out who else could possibly have a key to the house. His words froze me in place. No one. No one else should have a copy. He said he'd talk to Nick and call me back. When he did, he confirmed it. Nick said he hadn't given a key to anyone either. It was getting late, and I was genuinely worried the person might come back. So I told James I'd stay one more night, but I needed him back the next day. Then I barricaded the door, moved a dresser in front of it, dragged the couch to block everything. Then I shut myself in the room and just hoped no one would try to come in that night. Luckily, no one did. And the next day, James was back. Nick returned the day after that. The house had clearly been searched, but nothing seemed to be missing. Whoever had gotten inside knew exactly what they were looking for. I stayed with James that night while they changed the locks and waited for Nick to come back. To this day, None of us know who got in, or what they were after, or how they managed to get their hands on one of the keys. This all happened when I was 19, and still living in West Virginia. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like that part of the country. I actually love it, and it was home for a long time. But after what happened, and all the isolation I felt afterward, I really needed to get away for a while. And I ended up moving to California. Now, I only go back a few times a year to visit my parents and my brother. At the time, I had 2 jobs, one at a convenience store, and the other at a gas station. I worked mornings at the store, and then did 3 evening shifts a week at the gas station. I'd go in around 9 p.m. and get off around 2 a.m. I don't know if you know this, but West Virginia, especially the part I lived in, is super remote. Lots of mountains and dense forest. It can be absolutely beautiful during the day, but at night, straight up terrifying. The gas station I worked at was just off the highway, so we did get a decent amount of customers. But the road to my house was completely isolated. It took me about 35 minutes to drive home, through nothing but woods. Because it was so remote and we had a lot of truckers stopping by, I never worked alone. It was always me, or whoever was on shift, plus someone in the back working the kitchen, making basic meals for people on the road. You know, simple stuff just to keep them fed. That particular Tuesday, it was raining, which made the station feel even darker than usual. It was already past 1 a.m., and both Jared, the guy working in the kitchen, and I were just about ready to clean up and head out. The only good thing about Tuesdays was getting to leave on time. But, right around 1:05, this man walked in. And the second I saw him, something just felt off. He looked like the kind of guy who hadn't left his house in days, maybe holed up in a basement playing video games. Don't get me wrong, I love video games. That's just the vibe he gave off. He didn't look like a trucker or a tourist. He just seemed out of place. I asked if he needed anything, and he said he was hungry and was going to grab a table. Before walking off, he asked for a black coffee and a bowl of fries. He sat at the farthest table in the place, but he positioned himself so he was facing directly toward the counter, straight toward me. So, even though he was in the back corner, he had a clear view of me the whole time. As I worked, I could feel his eyes on me. Every time I glanced over, yep, still staring. We exchanged a couple polite fake smiles. But I'm not gonna lie, he made me uncomfortable. Not in a super threatening way or anything, because I definitely dealt with worse at that job. Some guys were way too forward, the kind that didn't know how to take a no. There'd even been a time when another customer had to step in and tell a guy to back off because I clearly wasn't interested. So, compared to that, he wasn't the worst. But still, something felt off. I stepped into the kitchen and asked Jared how long the fries would take, and he told me he'd dropped the bag and had to make a fresh batch. I walked over to the guy's table, apologized for the wait, and said it wouldn't be long. I asked if he wanted his coffee now, or preferred to wait until the fries were ready. He said he'd rather have both at the same time. I guess I made a weird face because he noticed and laughed, saying he knew it was kind of a weird request. I smiled back and said I'd seen weirder, just trying to be nice. I was about to walk away when he asked if I lived nearby, a classic question. I gave my usual lie, said I lived 3 towns over. I never told strangers where I actually lived. Then he asked if I liked living there. I just gave a little shrug and said, "It's all right. Not great, not awful. It is what it is." Then I excused myself, saying I had to check on something in the back, just to get away from the conversation. When I came back with the food, he held out his hand and told me his name was Rowan. I just smiled, nodded, and went back behind the counter. A few minutes later, I heard a semi pulling into the lot, and for some reason, I felt a wave of relief. Just knowing there was someone else around helped. Around 1:30, Rowan finished eating. I dropped the check, just a subtle way to let him know it was time to go. Something about him was still bothering me. He paid in cash, said it was nice meeting me, and left. I felt instant relief watching him walk out, get in his car, and drive away. By the time it got close to 2, we'd finished closing up and were ready to head home. Jared lived in the opposite direction from me. We locked the front door, and each went to our cars. There were only our 2 cars in the lot. Jared's was closer to the entrance, so he got in, waved, and drove off. Mine was parked way in the back, as far from the door as possible. There were 5 trucks parked that night, so I'd had to leave my car all the way down there. I picked up my pace. It was pitch black in that part of the lot. The only thing still lit up was the vending machine. I had goosebumps everywhere. I jumped in my car, locked the doors, and tried to start it. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. That's when the panic kicked in. My car had never failed me before. I mean, I knew it had to happen eventually. But seriously? Out here? At 2 in the freaking morning? Then I felt that pit in my stomach. Headlights turned on. I heard an engine start. A car pulled into the lot. I knew it was Rowan. Without thinking, I called 911. I was sure he'd done something to my car. He had to have been waiting. But how did he know which car was mine? And what the hell did he do to it? When the operator picked up, all I could say was where I was and that a man was following me. By that point, Rowan had pulled up right next to my car, smiling. He motioned for me to roll the window down. I knew I had to buy time. The cops were on the way, but they weren't here yet. I cracked the window just enough so he could hear me and tried to sound as calm as possible. Told him my car wouldn't start, and I had no idea why. He smiled and said not to worry, that he knew about cars and could help. Told me to get out and let him take a look. My brain was racing, palms sweating. I asked if he could just check under the hood first, see if anything looked off. I saw a flicker of something in his expression, maybe frustration. But he smiled again and said, "Sure." As soon as he walked around to the front, I called Jared, as quietly as possible, so Rowan wouldn't hear. Jared had just left, and I knew he'd get there faster than the police. I don't know if Rowan realized what I was doing, but not long after, he came back around and asked again if I'd step out of the car. We both knew that wasn't going to happen. Then, he bent down to grab something off the ground. Something I hadn't even seen was there. And suddenly, the passenger side window exploded. 2 shards hit my cheek. I screamed that the police were coming and held up my phone. He grabbed my wrist and tried to yank me out. I was screaming like crazy. Like, somehow someone out there in the woods might hear me. Through my screams, I didn't even notice Jared's car pulling back into the lot, straight toward us. He jumped out and fired a shot into the air. That was enough. Rowan let go of me and bolted into the woods. He knew he couldn't get back to his car. Jared had blocked the way. He probably thought it was the cops. The police showed up not long after. I wasn't shaking as badly by then, but my wrist hurt like hell, and my cheek was stinging from the cuts. The officers were really kind and said they were going to catch him. I wasn't so sure. But 2 days later, I got a call. They'd caught him trying to hitchhike a few miles away. Turns out he was from Jackson, Ohio, and already had 2 restraining orders out on him. Knowing he was caught and couldn't hurt me again definitely helped, but I still couldn't bring myself to live in such an isolated area anymore. I looked for jobs out of state and ended up landing a good one in California. It's been 6 years now. I don't know if I'll ever move back, but one thing's for sure. I'm never working another night shift again. The story I'm about to tell you happened about 12 years ago, but it's still one of the most disturbing and confusing things I've ever witnessed. It didn't happen to me directly, but I was there. I saw everything. It was with a friend of mine. Let's call her Mary. We met when we were kids and stayed close over the years, mostly because we both lived near this huge forest. When we were younger, we'd spend entire summers exploring that place. Over time, our love for nature stuck. Mary especially became a really experienced hiker. That summer, she wanted to hike a big chunk of the Appalachian Trail. She asked me to come with her, but I had just started a new job and couldn't take time off. So we made a plan. She'd start the hike alone, and a week later, I'd meet up with her at a designated spot. I'd bring her new food, clean clothes, and take anything she didn't need back with me. That first weekend went great. Her solo week had gone smoothly. She kept the pace she wanted, and she was feeling good. Our weekend together was nice too. We were in a busier area, but still managed to find some cool trails. But on Sunday after lunch, I had to leave. I had work on Monday, and she was going to keep going alone until our next meeting point. Simple plan. We'd meet Friday night or Saturday morning if she was running behind. But then, Thursday night, around 11 p.m., I got a call from her. She used her satellite phone. Her voice was fast, nervous, almost paranoid. She said she didn't know if she could keep up the pace. Then she said maybe I shouldn't come that weekend after all. I asked her several times what was going on, but she just kept repeating the same phrases. Nothing made sense. At one point, she suddenly changed her mind and told me to definitely come, and to bring her mother's ruby necklace. She told me exactly where it was, and, since I had a key to her place, asked me to go get it. I was seriously worried. The whole call was off. I started thinking maybe someone was following her, or she was having a mental breakdown alone out there in the woods. I asked if I should call the cops, but she kept saying everything was fine when it definitely wasn't. So before heading to the meeting point that Saturday, I went to the police. I told them everything. How off the call was. How genuinely concerned I was for her safety. I said it was possible she wouldn't show up. But she did. And she was totally fine. Like nothing had happened. I felt like an idiot, and I tried to talk to her about it, but she said the call was normal, that I was overreacting. But I knew I wasn't. I knew what I'd heard. I asked why she wanted the necklace, and she just said it made her feel closer to her mom. That was it. The whole thing was strange and uncomfortable, but to anyone who hadn't heard that call, I was the one who seemed paranoid. The police definitely acted like I'd wasted their time or misinterpreted something. We kept hiking, even though something still felt off. During the day, she seemed okay. A bit tired, maybe from bad sleep, but otherwise herself. Sometimes she'd space out, but nothing too weird. But that night, it all came back. No warning and no explanation. We were already in the tent when she suddenly got paranoid again, said someone was following her. Then out of nowhere, she started laughing. Hysterically. But it wasn't happy laughter. It was wrong. I thought maybe she'd eaten some kind of toxic berry, or maybe she was taking something. Whatever it was, it scared the hell out of me. After that burst of laughing, she'd go completely blank, silent, like emotionally gone. Then she'd suddenly crash and fall asleep. Deep sleep. I thought about heading back, but it was night. We were in the middle of nowhere, and I didn't trust the situation at all. I wasn't even sure she could walk properly, or if she'd bolt into the forest and vanish. I decided I'd sleep in her tent that night. I just had a feeling something was really wrong. While she slept, I went through her pack. I looked for pills, substances, anything that could explain it. I found nothing. The next morning, normal again. A little slow to start, but as the day went on, she was back to her usual self. I tried to bring it up, told her she wasn't okay and that we needed to leave. But she just insisted I was exaggerating. Said she didn't remember anything. Said she needed to finish the hike. So I told myself, tonight, I'm staying alert. If it happens again, I'm calling for help and getting her out of there. That evening, we set up camp again. She said she was going to collect sticks for the fire. At first, I went with her, but halfway through, I realized it was a good chance to check her stuff again. I told her I needed to go to the bathroom and went back to camp. What I found froze me. There was a man, no clue where he came from, and he was putting something in my water bottle. Then he walked over to Mary's bottle, opened it, and poured something in there too. I froze. The fear hit me instantly. I had no idea who this guy was or what he wanted, and I had nothing on me. I waited until he walked away, then sprinted back to Mary. She was as shocked as I was, and from her reaction, it felt like she'd already suspected something was going on. We had to leave. Immediately. Even if it was night. Someone was out there with us in that forest. And we had no idea what they were planning. We went back to camp, grabbed only our backpacks, and got ready to go. Before leaving, I tried to fake it. I spoke out loud like I was tired and didn't want to keep hiking that night. Mary caught on right away and played along, saying we were just going for a short walk and would be back soon. We were trying to make it seem like we weren't actually leaving. It was our only shot. As we hiked, we definitely heard footsteps. Mary looked at me right away. She heard it too. We picked up the pace as much as we could. Around 5 a.m., we made it to the start of a trailhead, close to a more populated area. Somewhere we could finally feel kinda safe. We called the cops right away. We told them everything. And that's when, accidentally, one of the officers let something slip. Turns out this wasn't the first report like this in that area. At least 3 similar incidents had already been reported. And 12 years later, the case is still open. And the man? He's still out there, doing God knows what. My name's Duncan, and I've been hiking all over different parts of the US for about 13 years now. I started right after my mom passed away, at a time when I really needed to keep my mind busy, and I ended up falling totally in love with it. The isolation in some areas, the kindness of people in others, the landscapes, the challenges, everything became part of those moments, and over time I learned to appreciate each one. even when someone kind of annoying or weird showed up and ruined the peace I was looking for. At least those people always gave me good stories to tell. But what happened to me 2 years ago in the Smokies? Well, that one didn't make for a good story. Or actually, it's the one I'm going to tell you now. Even today, it's hard for me to think about it, because if I hadn't kept my cool and thought fast, I might not be here to tell it. A coworker of mine owns a cabin up in the Smoky Mountains, and he usually rents it out to different people. Since we work together, sometimes he lets me stay there for next to nothing. That was actually my 3rd time at that cabin, and I loved it. Whenever I felt really stressed out or just wanted to go on a hike, I'd hit him up to see if it was available. It was the start of summer, which meant the Smokies were looking their best. I loved going during that time of year. I'd already been there for 3 days when everything started. Just to give you a bit of context, the cabin's pretty isolated. It's rare to run into anyone, but it's not totally off the grid. It's actually just a few miles from a small town and relatively close to one of the more popular trails. So every now and then, you'd run into another hiker. 2 years ago, when I'd been there, I got a scare in the middle of the night when a couple knocked on the door, totally panicked, because someone had been stalking them. I'll admit, I was pretty cautious at first, but they didn't have anything on them, and they seemed genuinely freaked out. We ended up having to call the cops, because someone really was following them at night. That was the first time anything like that had happened to me, but I'd already heard a bunch of stories about that part of the country, so I always made sure not to take any unnecessary risks. I avoided going out at night, didn't do hikes that took me too far from the cabin, and always carried my gun. Even though I avoided going out at night, it wasn't like some hard rule. I had done it a few times, and that night I was feeling kind of claustrophobic. My sister had called me to talk about a bunch of decisions we needed to make about our dad, and I just couldn't clear my head inside the cabin. So I decided to take a short walk to this lake area that's nearby. It's a pretty chilled path, only takes about 15 minutes. It was already past 10 p.m. when I left the cabin and started walking toward the lake. The night was calm, full of the usual forest sounds. It actually felt good, and I was already feeling a lot better by the time I got close to the water. But that's when I saw them. These guys, or at least, they looked like guys, dressed head to toe in black, hoods up, throwing something into the lake. They were on this small boat, like a canoe or something, and whatever they were throwing in was huge. It looked super heavy too, because one of them almost tipped over trying to get it overboard. I was still a good distance away, but since I wasn't expecting to see anyone, I didn't even realize I had my flashlight on. One of them looked straight in my direction. I turned it off immediately, but I knew they had seen me. I had no clue what they were doing, but I'm not stupid. Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't good. I mean, it's the middle of nowhere, it's late at night. They're all in black and throwing something massive into a lake. Yeah, that's shady as hell. Right before I turned and started heading back, I saw the one who had spotted me pull out a phone and make a call. I have no idea what happened after that, because I was already putting distance between us. I walked fast for about 5 minutes. I just wanted to get back to the cabin. I was feeling seriously on edge. But then I heard a sound up ahead. A branch snapped, and it wasn't the kind of snap that happens naturally. I don't know how to explain it, but I just knew someone was there. I stopped immediately and pointed my flashlight. And that's when a guy stepped out from behind the trees. And I realized this was way worse than I thought. Not only had he been waiting for me, but he had a black scarf covering his face. He didn't want to be recognized, and he was there to confront me about what I'd just seen. I quickly pulled out the gun I always carry and aimed it at him, telling him to let me pass. He asked me what I saw, and I told him that if he let me go, I hadn't seen a damn thing. But if he didn't, then yeah, I saw everything, and they were gonna have a real problem. I tried to sound as confident as I could, and I think it worked, 'cause he backed off. I started moving away, slowly, still aiming at him the whole time. Then, I started running. I knew they'd come after me. That guy only backed off 'cause he was alone. Once the other two got back from the lake, it'd be 3 against 1. At that point, I decided to change the plan. I wasn't going back to the cabin. I was heading straight for my car, and then to the police. The hike, or more like the sprint, back to the car was rough. The woods were full of noises, and I had no idea where that guy was, or if anyone else was gonna pop out of nowhere. At one point, I was absolutely sure I was being followed, but I kept going until I got to the car. Luckily, there's one thing I always do when I go out to places like this. Something I picked up from a true crime documentary that's stuck with me ever since. To make sure I always had a way out, I'd bury a box near the car in a spot easy to recognize, with a gun, a burner phone, a first aid and emergency kit, and a spare key to the car. I'm pretty sure that's what saved me. I dug up that box as fast as I could, grabbed the key, and jumped into the car. It wasn't until I locked the doors and started the engine that I finally felt like I could breathe again. I went straight to the police and told them everything. The next day, they sent a team to the site, and after seeing the cabin had been completely broken into, they got a warrant to search the lake. That was the first real confirmation that at least part of my story was true. Nothing was found. Those other two must have stayed behind to recover whatever it was they threw in. How they did it, I have no clue. Meanwhile, someone else broke into the cabin, looking for me. I knew that at least one of them had seen my face, so I never went back to that part of the country. And honestly, I don't plan to. I also don't work at the same company anymore. I heard my coworker only just started renting out the cabin again. And apparently there are people staying there right now. No idea if they know the story, but I doubt it. I've never seen anything about it go public. What happened on that trip, what I'm about to tell you, completely changed the way I look at the loneliness of the mountains. Before I get into it, I just want to make it clear. We weren't some clueless group of amateurs. Still, I know for a fact we weren't ready for what went down. Me, my wife Agnes, and our friend Alice had already done several stretches of the Appalachians together. It started as this casual thing, weekend hikes here and there. But over time, it became a real tradition. Those little weekend treks turned into full-on expeditions. Tougher trails, longer days deep in off-the-grid wilderness, cold nights either in shelters, tents, or just under the stars. We'd done it all. Truth is, those hikes were a kind of therapy for all of us. I work in tech, constantly buried under notifications and meetings. Agnes is a nurse, carrying around emotional weight most people can't even imagine. And Alice, a high school teacher, seemed to always carry that quiet frustration of someone who's expected to be a mom, a therapist, and an educator to a bunch of teenagers, especially in a country that's been waging war on public education for years. So, yeah, that week we'd planned in the mountains of southern West Virginia. We were counting down the days. Just the 3 of us. No signal, no noise. Just the forest and its sounds. The first few days went exactly as planned. We kept the pace we wanted, hit the parts of the trail we'd mapped out. We saw some truly breathtaking views and got to experience that pure, untouched silence you only get way out in the middle of nowhere. Setting up camp was second nature by that point. We all had our roles down. Agnes handled food and always stashed it away from camp to keep predators away. Alice got the fire going. I took care of the tents and water. It was like a well-rehearsed dance, each of us moving in sync, no rush. But everything changed on the third night. We were just finishing setting up camp, the sun already dipping behind the mountains. It was getting dark fast, and we were trying to beat the last bit of daylight. The air was cooling down, and the daytime sounds of the woods were fading, being replaced by the eerie nighttime ones. That's when she appeared. This woman just stumbled into our camp out of the brush like a ghost. Her clothes were shredded, her face was this raw mix of fear and desperation. At first we freaked. We legit stepped back. Totally freaked out by the sight of her. But it didn't take long to realize she could barely stand. Something was very wrong. She was filthy, her eyes sunken, her breathing quick and shallow. She kept begging for help, but her words were all over the place, saying someone was after her, that she was being hunted. It didn't make much sense. We couldn't tell if it was trauma, a mental breakdown, or maybe drugs. She just kept repeating the same stuff over and over. There was no one behind her. Or at least, we couldn't see anyone past the firelight, and we didn't hear a thing. It was obvious she was in bad shape. We warmed up some oatmeal with hot water and gave it to her. Agnes, being who she is, sat down next to the woman, tried to calm her, figure things out. She ate, but like it physically hurt to do so. You could tell she wasn't hungry. She just needed something in her. Our plan was to wait till morning and hike out for help. No way we were going to risk wandering through pitch-black woods, not knowing where we were even headed. She eventually quieted down, kind of went into this blank, checked-out state. We figured we'd try to rest a little. We were just about to crawl into the tents when it happened. A man stepped out from the trees. Just appeared, like he'd been standing there the whole time. None of us heard him coming. He had a gun pointed right at us, but he was staring past us, right at the woman. And he smiled. Not a kind smile. It was cold, twisted. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said he just wanted the woman back. If we handed her over, nobody had to get hurt. He barely even acknowledged Agnes or Alice, just kept his eyes locked on me. That's when everything flipped. Alice grabbed a burning branch from the fire and launched it right at his face. It was fast, pure instinct. The guy never saw it coming, especially not from her. He stumbled back, dropped the gun, clutching his face, completely thrown off by the hit and the surprise. Without missing a beat, Agnes darted forward and grabbed the gun. Meanwhile, I just stood there, frozen like I was watching a movie happen in front of me. The guy, realizing the tables had turned, backed off fast and disappeared into the woods before we could really do anything. Then we noticed the woman was gone. We panicked at first, thought she'd run off again. But we found her curled up inside Agnes's tent, hugging her knees, like she was trying to disappear inside herself. It was honestly heartbreaking. She was shaking like crazy, not from cold, we all knew that, but from pure terror. And truthfully, all of us were a little terrified too. I knew we couldn't stay there. That guy could come back any second, maybe not alone this time. We asked her if it was just him or if there were others, but she couldn't answer. At that point, I told Agnes and Alice to stay with her while I went looking for cell signal. I grabbed a flashlight and started walking. Hiking through the woods at night, easily one of the most surreal things you can do. The forest sounds different after dark. Every little crack or rustle sounds like footsteps. I kept imagining the guy trailing me through the trees. We'd left the gun with the girls for protection. I only had a small knife. So yeah, every shadow looked like danger. Every sound, a threat. But I kept going. I knew I had no choice if we wanted to get out of that situation. With a little luck, and after climbing a small ridge, I finally got a weak signal. Just enough to call for help. The call dropped twice, but I managed to give them our coordinates and say we needed help. That there might be a criminal in the woods with us. Then I made my way back, and we waited, on high alert, jumping at every snap of a twig in the dark. The rescue team showed up before sunrise. They took all of us straight to the hospital. The woman, of course, needed medical attention. The rest of us were just in shock. That's when we finally learned more. She was Canadian, had been missing for over 2 months. Her family had given up hope of finding her alive. Turns out she'd been held in awful conditions for weeks. The guy who came after her, her ex, also Canadian. She'd broken things off and he just snapped. He crossed the border, followed her across states, and somehow managed to isolate her in the wilderness for weeks. A full-on nightmare. Thankfully, the story had a somewhat okay ending. She survived. She was going to recover, and the guy was caught a few days later. But something in us changed. We came so close to something tragic. That forest, which had always been our escape, had turned into the setting for something out of a horror movie. We never went back to the Appalachians. Not because we're scared. We've done plenty of hikes since, in other places. But because that mountain, after that night, just wasn't the same. It felt heavy and dark.